Hello and welcome to the Port of Los Angeles September media briefing. I'm Philip Sanfield, the Port's Communications Director. And with me, as usual, is Executive Director Gene Seroka. Welcome, Gene.
Hello, Philip, and thank you all for joining us. Once again, we've got a full agenda today, starting with the ongoing high volume here in Los Angeles. We'll explore all the latest data, break down the numbers, and then provide a short-term forecast. Next, we'll be joined by George Goldman, the President and CEO of the North American Division for CMA CGM, a global leader in ocean shipping, logistics, and terminal operations. George also oversees CMA CGM's iconic shipping line, American President Lines. With over 3 decades of experience, he's a highly accomplished international shipping executive. George and I will discuss today's supply chain issues, including the impact of the East Coast labor negotiations on trade. I'm looking forward to our conversation, and afterward, we'll both be available to take your questions.
Thank you, Gene. Before we get into it, we should probably start with some breaking news. The Fed has just announced a half-point cut in interest rates. Before we start, any thoughts on that?
Long-awaited good news, Philip. I think it'll have an impact on capital investment, infrastructure, inventories across the supply chain. It's a start, but very good news across the economic segments.
Very good. Let's start with the volume here. We're coming off our best July ever with 939,000 container units last month. Please share the new data and where we stand year to date.
My pleasure, Philip. August was an even better month here at the Port of Los Angeles. Our dedicated waterfront workforce processed over 960,000 container units. That's a lot of cargo. In fact, this marks our busiest non-pandemic month ever. We surpassed last summer by 16% and topped our 5-year August average by 9%. Just to give you some perspective on how busy we were in August, we had 97 container vessels call the port, the highest number in 4 years. 32 of those ships had a capacity of more than 10,000 TEUs, setting another record here in LA. And all that cargo was handled without interruption, demonstrating our efficiency in managing these high volumes. Now, let's delve a little deeper into how these numbers break down. Imports led the way with 509,000 20-foot equivalent units. That's our 3rd highest total ever and nearly 18% more than last year. We've now had back-to-back months where imports have eclipsed the 500,000 mark. As I mentioned, this elevated volume, some of which is typically headed to other gateways, has been coming our way for several reasons. First, underlying economic indicators remain strong, and today's just announced interest rate cut should boost U.S. consumer confidence. Second, extended labor negotiations at East and Gulf Coast ports have prompted importers to reallocate some of their cargo out west. And lastly, ongoing security concerns in the Red Sea, combined with lingering drought conditions in the Panama Canal, are influencing many shippers' decisions. So at least in the short term, I expect these factors to continue driving cargo our way. Shifting over to exports, we moved 121,000 loaded containers in August, which is a slight 3% decrease from last year. While this ends our impressive 14-month run of year-on-year improvements, I remain optimistic about our potential to collaborate with American agriculture interests, manufacturers, and others to continue growing U.S. exports. Meanwhile, empty containers exceeded 329,000 TEUs, marking a 24% increase over last year. Processing these empties helps clear our docks and prepares us for the next wave of vessels soon approaching. And now, 8 months into 2024, I'm pleased to report that we've processed over 6.6 million container units. That's 1 million more than last year at this time. It's also a robust 17% increase compared to 2023 and exceeds that all-important 5-year average by 4%. All in all, this peak shipping season in Los Angeles has been strong and sustained. I'm immensely grateful to all our dedicated partners for their commitment to moving cargo safely and efficiently through America's port.
Thanks for that great overview, Gene. You touched on the short-term outlook. Would you elaborate on how September and the months ahead are shaping up?
Absolutely, Philip. The American consumer continues to spend. The latest Commerce Department data shows another uptick of 0.1% in retail sales during the month of August, coming on top of the 1.1% increase in July. Online retailers, sporting goods stores, as well as home and garden outlets all reported higher sales. In fact, some of the cargo we're currently seeing is replenishing inventories even beyond the holiday season. That, combined with a steady import of manufacturing parts and components, which make up about a quarter of our imports, should keep near-term volume elevated here in Los Angeles. And our operations data supports this. For example, in the first week of September, we had 60 labor gangs or teams working 18 vessels at berth, both marking the highest numbers since we began tracking these details during the pandemic. That same day, 72 ships were en route to the San Pedro Bay ports, also the highest count in years. Given all that, I expect September to be another month exceeding 900,000 TEUs. After that, it's possible that some of the early front-loading of cargo over the past several months could impact Q4 volume. Another factor to consider is Golden Week, a week-long holiday in China that began on October 1st, when many workers will take a break, go visit families, and take vacations. Bottom line, I believe there's still some momentum left in this exceptionally strong peak season. Here in Los Angeles, we're ready to adapt to the increasing demand and meet the needs of our customers.
Thank you, Gene. And now, would you please introduce our guest?
Oh, my pleasure, Philip. Before assuming his current role as CEO North America for CMA CGM and APL, George Goldman was president of Zim American Integrated Shipping Services. George has had a long, successful career with APL, where he held senior executive positions at multiple international posts, including Hong Kong, Singapore, and Shanghai. Our professional paths have frequently crossed over the past decades, and I consider George to be a good friend. George, thanks for being here in LA today and right here in Studio 552.
Thank you, Gene, for having me. It's a pleasure to be here. And these numbers I look at, congratulations. Doing a fantastic job in the conveyance of cargo and the unexpected, future of what we see going forward.
Fantastic, George. Let's start right off with a topic that many of our journalists online today have for us. They're watching closely about the East Coast and Gulf Coast labor negotiations. So far, what impact has this protracted discussion had on our supply chain?
Well, first, I think it goes without saying that CMA CGM very much in support of collective bargaining. We look to their help, our help. We need them, they need us. It helps both of us to achieve what we need to do for our customers, the conveyance of cargo. So that's foremost on our minds, to come to some resolution, and hopefully we can do that sooner than later. Impact, as you alluded to earlier, some front loading. We as a carrier are mandated by our customers on where they see cargo going. Their ability to front load, is it an effect of the Red Sea? Is it to Panama? There are a lot of issues that can point to what has actually caused that. But right now, we're waiting and seeing to what happens.
Yeah, and the Atlanta Fed, George, is forecasting now 2.9% GDP growth for Q3. And these guys really have their finger on the pulse of the economy. It's my view that all of our ports nationwide have to be running at top speed to fuel this economy, as you say.
Yeah, I mean, CMA CGM has investments on the East Coast ports. We have investments here in Los Angeles. We look to go future investments. Along with some of the things that we're working on, it's very important on the conveyance of cargo.
Yeah, and all of this in a presidential election year.
Yes.
What do you see in the upcoming fourth quarter, maybe even jumping into Q1 of 2025?
We see it strong. The commodities that the consumer in North America has purchased at the beginning of the pandemic, some of those are now coming up for renewal. As an example, I need a new coffee maker. I bought it at the beginning of the pandemic. Some of these white goods, they're about a 4-year lifespan. We see the ability, we see it happening right now with the strength of the consumer market, retail sales. We're bullish, quite honestly. We see that GDP numbers, good. As you alluded to, the interest rates coming down, mortgages just today, that rate came down. So we see this leading us up into, aside from any labor issues that may or may not occur, we see this being a good fourth quarter.
Shifting gears just a little bit, George, CMA CGM is known worldwide, a leader in so many of our supply chain segments. Talk a little bit about the initiatives on a global basis here in North America and right down the street at Phoenix Marine Terminal.
Globally, as you know, we're a global carrier, and we look to other parts of the world, that ability to listen to your customers, go where they go. We see places in South America, Africa, we like India. As it relates here to North America, continuously our objective is to create more investments in the U.S., create more jobs. And as you said, here in the Port of Los Angeles, expanding on the on-dock rail abilities that the port has, we're very excited, and congratulations to you, City of Los Angeles, the commissioners for working with us and us with you to get this done. And we look for future engagement with investments here.
That's a $50+ million project that we've collaborated on between our organizations to densify that on-dock rail at Pier 300, the Phoenix Marine Terminal. And again, being able to work these ships the way we do, an average of 12,000 TEUs exchanged per vessel, and get this product out to 15 major distribution points in the country has really been our hallmark, and we're only going to improve with your partnership.
It's all about the conveyance of cargo and that ability to feed through the system, and that's really what we're here to do. And we see this as a great opportunity to increase our own capacity coming to the West Coast.
And as we look, George, from the time that you and I spent in Asia working, we know that purchase orders come out from manufacturers and retailers alike about 90 to 120 days before sailing in Asia, and all indications from where we sit, those POs look strong.
Yes, they do, and I think that the God bless the American consumer. The numbers are good, and we hope that this continues.
I know I am. Keep buying, George. Really appreciate your insights, and again, what a treat to have you here. Let's turn it back over to Philip and take some questions from the media.
Yep.
Thank you, Gene. As usual, we've received several, actually many questions in advance today, and we're going to start with those. If you do have a question that you haven't asked, please type it into the Q&A box below, and we'll try to get to those as well. And remember to include your name and affiliation if you do type into the chat, into the Q&A box. So a number of questions on East Coast labor. Let's just get to them. We'll start with the first ones from CNBC's Lorianne Laraco. George, approximately how much trade has diverted from the East Coast as a result of fears of a ILA strike, and has the number of diversions increased for freight that is on the water now?
The reality diversions is, as we as an ocean carrier do not dictate diversions. This is dictated and mandated by our customers. They're the ones that will tell us if they want to divert, what supply chain channels they prefer to use. If they see obstacles coming in the future, we work with them. If we have it within our network, our existing network, to divert cargo, we will. But as far as the decision, it is not really an ocean carrier that decides diversions. It's really our customers.
Thank you. Lorianne has a couple on this topic for Gene. The first is, how much of the increase in TEUs here in Los Angeles is diverted cargo from the East Coast?
Hi, Lorianne, and thanks for joining us again today. It's hard to tell. For all the reasons that we've been talking about in these media briefings and here today with George, there's a lot underlying these concepts, a lot for the logistics manager, the supply chain director to take into account when figuring out their allocations and gateways and shipping patterns. So you can't really put your finger on how much has been done because of ongoing discussions in a certain area. But again, the underlying economy is strong. I've recounted that I was in Asia back in November of 2023 and talking to a lot of folks then. They were saying fractionally they would take some of their allocation and spread it around a little bit to hedge against any one of these issues going in a different direction, whether it be labor talks, the ongoing drought conditions in the Panama Canal, which seemingly have gotten better, and the longer term issue of safety and security of our vessels, crew, and cargo going through the Red Sea up to the Suez Canal. Suez Canal traffic is down 80 to 90% based on open sourced reporting that's been done through the media. So all of this has really created a second look by supply chain experts as to how they want to route that cargo. Now, we're up 17% year on year through the month of August, but those are off relatively modest comps. We had high levels of inventory across retail and manufacturing last year. Those have been worked down broadly, and you're starting to see not only that consumer buying pattern, but beefing up those inventories as we go forward.
One more from Lorianne on this topic, Gene. The ILA's Harold Daggett threatened the ILA would come to the West Coast ports as they did in the 1970s to stop vessels carrying East Coast trade. Is the port preparing for any type of ILA freight disruption attempts?
First, I think Harold has to say that. And I don't have any evidence right now, Lorianne, of cargo ships taking a left-hand turn that normally go to an East or Gulf Coast port and coming here to the West, or specifically Los Angeles. There has been a decades-long tradition between labor organizations that one will not take advantage of another's collective bargaining process. And as you rightly say, this hasn't happened since the 70s. I don't see it happening again here. Thanks for the question, though. Very important.
There are several more nuanced questions on this topic, so I want to get to them all up front here. Paul Berger from the Wall Street Journal is asking George, what are CMA CGM's contingency plans for a possible strike?
As I mentioned earlier, our desire is to have a resolution. That's number one. We have to get to the table. We have to be able to talk, and that's number one objective. Again, contingency planning, as Gene alluded to, there are very zero ships that I'm aware of that will be diverted to the West Coast. As of right now, customers have made that decisions. They're the ones who will guide us as to, for them, what is the best avenue to pursue. If within our network, our global network, we have existing ships that are somewhere else that are currently going to the West Coast, cargo may flow from an origin point there, but not diverted.
Very good. Lisa Bartline is asking, really for either one of you here, has anyone from the Biden administration reached out to help with negotiations? The Journal of Commerce has reported that Julie Su has reached out to employers. Gene, maybe you'll start. I don't know if either one of you have knowledge of this.
Sure, thanks, Lisa. I know the administration is watching this very closely and, like always, engaging with principals to try to make sure folks stay at the table, keep talking, just like we've seen out here in the West with the ILWU, the UAW, and others. This has been a long time coming to make sure that our workforce is paid appropriately, coming off of all the work they did during the COVID surge. And it's not just in our industry, but across a broad group of organized labor forces that have been going to work day in and day out to help this American economy. So this, and obviously President Biden has said this many times, he's America's union president, and he's going to keep the interests of the workforce in mind, but full well knowing that it's these great companies that ship all this cargo, that bring the customers to the American economy, that are important as well.
Thank you. A couple more on this topic, one for George and one for Gene. Both Laura Curtis at Bloomberg, Lisa Bartline at Reuters are asking how long, George, could a strike go on without seriously impacting supply chains, and what are shipping lines doing in general to prepare?
One day is too long of a shutdown. The reality is that we're in a fluid supply chain process. The moment you close the door, things begin to back up. So we are not in any way looking forward to having any shutdown on any coast. So the preparation that is needed are really on the back end to work with our customers to communicate, keep an eye on it, and do what we can from that standpoint.
Thank you. Lastly, on this topic, Gene from Alejandra Carranza of Supply Chain Dive and also Laura from Bloomberg. Is the Port of LA prepared to meet a further uptick in volume if more cargo shifts here? And how much more cargo can LA handle?
Thanks, Alejandra and Laura. Great to have you with us again. The short answer to this is yes. And we've shown through this sustained peak season, more than 840,000 containers in June, 939 in July, 960 now in August, and we expect to be over 900,000 TEUs again in the month of September. We've shown that we can handle this cargo. I've shared with you before that the historical capacity of the Port of Los Angeles is about 1 million TEUs per month, and we witnessed that back in May of 2022. With all that we've learned through that COVID time, the collaboration with folks like George, who was on every one of those White House calls with Port Envoy John Picari and then retired General Steve Lyons to try to find better ways to move our supply chain goods and services, I believe now, with all the simulation we've done, our capacity will be at about 1.2 million TEUs. Again, this is from some great work that's been done on the ground with our private sector partners. The ILW labor guys and ladies have given us tips and ways to handle the business much better. And the Port Optimizer data allows us to see around corners and over hills like we've never been able to before. So if we're handling 950, 960,000 container units now, we're at about 80% of capacity. We've got 57,000 units on the ground. I see a little bit of a micro spike on dwell times when it comes to the on-dock rail services, but I've been in touch with both Western railroads again this week. I'll have meetings later at the end of the week with the most senior executives and making sure that we've got our eye on getting those dwell times down. Again, that's about 25% of our cargo, but we've got to keep it moving fluidly. I like where we're at right now. Most of our data that we put out on that dashboard from Mike DiBernardo every morning, those velocity statistics are at or better than where they were pre-COVID. We're working on the rail right now, and both companies tell me that they've handled more footage of rail cars in the past month than in recent memory. So everybody's working together, and we still have more room to grow as the cargo flows through Los Angeles. Thanks for the question.
Very good. We'll shift topics to sustainability here. We'll start with George. This is, again, Lisa from Reuters. Are uncertain supply lines of green methanol changing CMA CGM's net zero emission strategies? Are you ordering more ships that can run on LNG?
CMA CGM is committed to net zero, as are all ocean carriers. We're mandated by IMO to do this. The reality is that it is a process. It starts, you cannot flip a switch. It's a journey, and the journey starts with the beginning of LNG going into green LNG, it goes into methanol, green methanol, and then it works its way up the ladder to get to a point where we can truly say net zero. But the real question is, at the end of the day, if I'm a reporter, I would want to know who's going to pay for this and how we're going to pay for it. And that becomes a larger question. We need partners on this journey, and I think there is where we see the ability to work with our customers that have the same objective in mind. CMA and a few other carriers are at the forefront of this, and that's where we see this going, and the need to be able to have this discussion.
Thank you, George. On this topic for Gene, this is from Stas Margaronis of the American Journal of Transportation. The Port of LA recently hosted the naming ceremony of the methanol-powered ILA Maersk. Maersk's CEO Vincent Clerc has asked major ports to offer green fuels such as methanol and ammonia to support green shipping. What are the steps that the Port of LA needs to take to offer green methanol and green ammonia fuels to ships sailing to and from Los Angeles?
Well, thanks for joining again this month, Stas. Always good to hear from you. And as George said, it's a process. But it's my belief the Port of Los Angeles has to be in the game. With the modernization of these vessels, 2 gas tanks, if you will, and the ability to start testing out these ships like the Maersk Aletta. It was interesting because this ship had a number of calls, and then its last stop was in Xiamen, Fujian province in central China, and made it all the way here using the green methanol. Now, Just like we're doing in other sectors, it's going to take a lot of work on the infrastructure side. So where we have aspired to get to zero emissions cargo handling equipment by the year 2030 and heavy duty trucks by the year 2035, it's still early days in the manufacture, the affordability, and the confidence level that the users of this equipment will have that they can fuel up, charge up, and keep commerce moving across America. Now, here in California, the permitting process is quite unique. A number of steps have to be taken in that area and considerations as we live in a community of more than 260,000 residents. But again, we're going to keep pushing the envelope on this subject because getting to zero emissions on these vessels is a primary goal of ours when we started the Green Shipping Corridor. Now we have relationships with no fewer than 9 ports in the Asia Pacific market to help bring private sector interests like CMA CGM and others together and begin testing these alternative fuel methods. That work also, as I've said before, if we can cut the pollution on ships by 10% in the Shanghai to Southern California lane, that would be equivalent to all the pollution at the Port of Los Angeles in 1 year. The stakes are really big, and we can be at the forefront of developing this. So we've got to be a little patient on one side, but hurrying up on the other side if you're with folks that I work with every day, because we want to get there into this market and help support industry reach these goals. Thanks, Stas.
George, a couple different outlets are asking questions about tariffs. I think it can sum it up like this. What kind of impact would significant increases in tariffs have on global trade if enacted by the next U.S. presidential administration?
Well, the short answer is it would have a profound effect. But you have to look at it at 2 different levels. One is the current tariffs that are existing on the books today that are being increased. Those particular commodities are not the ones that you would see typically on containerized volume. They're not a huge impact. If you go beyond that, the new administration, you look at across-the-board tariff increases, whole other game. At the end of the day, the reality is that the cost of goods will go up, cost of service goes up, and ultimately it impacts the U.S. consumer, and it's an inflationary impact.
Gene, any follow-up thoughts on that same topic?
Yeah, George and I are aligned on this subject as well. Now, what we have to understand is this simply campaign talk, or will it really turn into policy? And I, for one, am not going to be dismissive of these statements. $3 trillion worth of imports here to the United States, a 10% tariff on that will mean that it hits the pocketbooks and wallets of American families. We'll be watching this very closely.
George, this question is primarily for you, but also Gene is probably going to want to comment here too. When do you think the surge of import containers hitting the U.S. coast now will start finding their way back to Asia as empties? Are you making plans at this point to run empty loaders? And do you see any issues with congestion at depots either in the U.S. or Asia?
The ships run both ways. So they have to go back, and they go back with laden cargo primarily and empties to top it off. Our desire is to balance the network as best we can, both here at destination or origin as well as overseas. So we will profile each ship the best we can with a combination of laden cargo for the U.S. exporters and help them where we can, as well as repositioning empty containers back to Asia.
Very good. Gene.
Yeah, from a Los Angeles perspective, I like where we're at right now. In the month of June, we empty repoed back about 275,000 TEUs. July was at about 325, and now we just reported 328,000 empties going back to Asia, preparing for the next round of imports. So those numbers all track with me. The simple math on the ground is imports are equivalent to the exports plus the empties to have that good match back like George is talking about, the round trip economics. The numbers on the ground here in LA also play out in that perspective as well. So I like the cadence of which the cargo is flowing. The velocity numbers look good, and the preparedness on the Asia side is also in good order. Thanks for the question, Paul.
Great. Well, this appears to be our last question coming in here. So if anyone has one, now's the time to drop it into the Q&A box. Gene, with all this cargo coming our way here in LA, any concerns or yellow flags that you're looking out for on the operations front?
Well, I run to work every morning because we have so much in front of us, and the hardworking men and women here, not only in the Los Angeles Harbor Department, but our private sector partners like George, the ILW workforce, truckers, the rail operators, and so many others chipping in. We've got more data now than ever before, and as I mentioned, it allows us to get to issues before they become problems. Right now, the rail dwell times for on-dock are at 8.4 days. It's about double where it should be, at the very least during peak season. And again, talking with our friends at both the Union Pacific and the BNSF, they have a laser focus on working down that number from a dwell time perspective. Also, it was reported to me yesterday by the UP, our friend Jim Bishop, that the cargo is moving out on a first in, first out basis. So we're not seeing these long dwell containers aging for weeks at a time. That's encouraging. We still got to do it chipping away at every single rail car, every single shift to get the cargo flowing through the United States. That's what we're focused on, but we look at a broad variety of numbers every day to make sure we got our finger on the pulse. We've got 57 ships coming in, which for right now, in a snapshot in time, still shows us that the market is very strong here in Los Angeles.
Very good. Gene, that concludes the media questions. Back to you for final thoughts.
George, so great to have you with us today, and always wonderful to catch up. I just got in from Indianapolis last night. You flew in to meet with your team. I know we're crisscrossing the world trying to keep cargo flowing, but man, as an old friend, thanks for coming in today.
Gene, it's our pleasure. My pleasure specifically. You and I go back a long ways, time in Asia, here in the U.S., and best of luck to you. We are here for you as a Port of Los Angeles to do what we can to help.
Well, my best to you, Chairman Rodolphe Sade, and so many others, Christine Cabou, Olivier Dubois, all our friends back in Marseille. Continued success to the company.
Thank you very much. We appreciate it.
Before we close today, I'd like to acknowledge National Hispanic Heritage Month, which began a few days ago. This annual observance celebrates the achievements, histories, traditions, diversity, and vibrant culture of Hispanic and Latino Americans here at the port community and across our great nation. Finally, I'd like to take a moment to share a bit about our newest member of the senior management team here at the Port of Los Angeles, Erica Calhoun. Recently appointed as the Deputy Executive Director for Harbor Administration, Erica's promotion is so well deserved. She previously served as our Chief of Staff here for the past 8.5 years. Erica brings more than 2 decades of experience with the City of Los Angeles, including diverse roles at the city's Housing Department, Los Angeles Police Department, and here at the port. Erica earned her undergraduate degree at the University of California, Berkeley, and a Master of Science in Public Administration from California State University, Los Angeles. We consider ourselves so fortunate to add such an incredibly talented professional to our executive team. In her new role, Erica will oversee key areas, including human resources, risk management, contracts and purchasing, and the commission office. When I'm out of town on business, she will serve as the acting executive director for the port. It's also worth noting that all divisions reporting to Erica are led by women. The latest addition to our team is Kathy Tanaka, our new director of human resources who oversees HR for nearly 900 Harbor Department employees. Both appointments exemplify our port's long-standing commitment to advancing women while promoting diversity and inclusion within our organization. And this commitment starts at the top. We're a department under the leadership of Mayor Karen Bass, the first woman to serve as mayor of Los Angeles. Our Harbor Commission, the port's oversight body, is led by another exceptional woman, Lucille Roybal Allard, who is a longtime member of Congress. Additionally, our executive leadership team includes Deputy Executive Director of Development, Dina Arian-Zalen, who oversees 4 port divisions and manages a multi-capital year improvement annual budget that will exceed $2.7 billion in total spend. Equally important, women occupy leadership positions throughout the port. Many began their careers with us as student workers and have since grown into roles of greater responsibility in engineering, construction, information technology, environmental management, and beyond. Two of our recent projects showcase significant contributions of women professionals. The first is the port's $73 million Pier 400 on-dock rail expansion, which was completed this past July. This multi-year infrastructure improvement has enhanced the intermodal rail storage yard at APM Container Terminal, resulting in improved cargo flow, reduced emissions, and safer roads around the port. It's worth noting, this Pier 400 project was led almost exclusively by women professionals at the port, with more than 10 women contributing their expertise. My sincerest congratulations to Sue Lai and Geraldine Shimabukuro, two of our senior engineers, for their leadership on this important project. We experienced a similar success with the recently completed $36 million Town Square and Promenade Phase 1 project right here in San Pedro. The planning through construction, this initiative was led entirely by a team of women engineers. These projects are particularly noteworthy because they defy industry norms. According to the Society for Women Engineers, women in this field stood at just under 17% in 2023. Here at the Port of LA, however, our numbers look different. Women represent 37% of our professional engineering workforce, more than double the national average. And in our engineering and construction divisions, which consist of 160 employees, 80% are minorities and women, as are 11 of the 14 members of the division's management team. I'm so proud to be part of an organization that serves not only as a workplace, but an accelerator for women in their careers. My heartfelt congratulations and appreciation go to Erica and all the hardworking women at our port. We would not be where we are today without your many contributions. Thank you for joining us today. We'll see you again in October.